Hi, Deirdre. Nice to see you again.
Always great to see you. And hello, everyone. Welcome to the DM show.
Yes, well, this is episode number 3.
Yeah.
And just before we start, because we're going to bring our guest Brooke Sellis on in just a couple of minutes, but we wanted to let everyone know we are not recording in December just because it's the holidays. Everyone's busy, thinking of other things, but we will be back in January. So stay tuned for information on the January 2023 show. Honestly, I cannot believe that we're heading into 2023, but back to today, because today we've got, I think, a really great topic and a fantastic guest to talk with.
Yes, we do. And we are going to get social with customer care with Brooke Sellis, who is the perfect professional to talk about this. So let me just briefly introduce Brooke, and then we'll bring her into the broadcast room. Brooke is the CEO and founder of B Squared Media, which is a digital marketing agency, award-winning, I might mention, focused on social media management and social-led customer care. Brooke's mantra is think conversation, not campaign, which is often difficult to do. Yeah. And we'll talk about this today. And of course, she is the author of this book right here, Conversations That Connect. So without further ado, here comes Brooke. Hi, Brooke.
Hello. Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm like over here smiling ear to ear with when you both of y'all put your books up. So thank you for that.
Well, welcome. You know what? And we can't sell them on these live streams, but honestly, we could. So welcome, Brooke. Before we start, we just like to say to anyone out there watching, please let us know that you're here, where you're from. And of course, if you have any questions, we'd love to hear from you.
Yes, and we have a ton of questions for Brooke, but if we see those comments and questions coming in, we will get right to them. Well, and I also want to mention in my lead up to Brooke that it was very short. Everybody should go check Brooke out, connect with her on LinkedIn, of course, and you can also find her on Twitter. All right, well, let's get started. Maybe Brooke will start with a simple question.
The softballs first, please.
Yeah, so let's do some softballs. What can brands do right now to connect and converse more with their customers?
Honestly, I think this is a mindset shift because I think traditionally the way brands and marketers look at connection is very passive or reactive, right? It's that email subscription, newsletter sign up, they follow you on social media. Brands and marketers view that as connection, but in my opinion, we're not really there yet because connection to me is not one way. It's not passive. It's not reactive. It's active. And to be active, it has to be a two-way thing. And that's why our motto is think conversation, not campaign, because as you start to get into some of these conversations with your audiences, with your customers, with your communities, you can start to really build the connections that then lead to bigger and better things that all of us marketers are looking for, like conversions, right? Or campaigns and conversions. But I think we first have to start with connection and a bigger, better idea of what connection actually means.
I'm glad you laid that out. And let's turn to who's out there. We've got Lori Gravitt. Hey, Lori. Kirk Hazlitt is checking in from, looks like sunny-ish Riverview, Florida. And let's see who else. We've got good afternoon. Glad to be here. I am based in Toronto, marketing coordinator. And we have Marco as well,
who's a former student of mine. So hi, Marco. Nice to see you.
Awesome. Well, hello, everybody. Now, Brooke, you made a really good point about moving from the passive to the active. Do you think that that's one of the reasons why maybe brands think that they're doing this right already? You don't know what you don't know.
Yes. And I think it's why we see a lot of brands still missing the mark on understanding the value of organic social media. I still see that happening a lot, right? Our social media strategy is failing. It's not working. Our content marketing is not working. Our content's falling flat. And I think it's because we're pushing, right? It's still that one-way concept. We're not thinking about getting anything back in return or having that two-way street kind of happen.
Well, talking about that two-way street, one thing that really stood out from your book was the SPT, which I know it's a terribly named thing. I can't even say it, right?
Just call it the onion theory.
The onion theory. That's good.
Yes.
And welcome one more person, Shushan Basoyan, another former student. Good to see you as well.
Aww.
Anyway, so what stood out was the fact that, brands and people really on social media share a lot of cliches.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you. That's so great. Things like that. And we all do that. We share a lot of facts, very factual thing, but it's hard to share opinions and feelings. And it's certainly hard. That's something I struggle with all the time. So do you want to talk about how we can get over that barrier or how brands can get over that barrier?
Yeah, well, let's talk about it from an art and science perspective, right? Because it's a little bit of both when we start talking about conversations and sharing opinions and feelings. From the art side or right brain side, this is how we build relationships. When you get to know someone, if they're only sharing cliches and facts about themselves, what the SPT or onion theory looks at is that's not really where relationships grow. That's not how trust is built, right? If I only know facts about Martin, we may connect. Maybe one of his facts is that he loves horses. Oh, great. Okay, he's a horseback rider. Oh, I am too. We could connect there, but that's going to ultimately lead to feelings because we're going to talk about our opinions about horses and horseback riding, how we feel about our own horse or whatever. So ultimately, even facts done correctly lead to opinions and feelings, right? It's just how relationships are born. On the science side of things, buying itself, if you look at, neuroscientists and some of the studies that they've done about buying, 95% of the buying process is based on emotion. So if we're putting out all of this content as brands, trying to get people to buy from us, but it's only cliches and facts, we've left out 95% of what people are looking for to make that purchase. Does that make sense?
Yes. And Kirk actually has a good point. He said the challenge is making clients' bosses understand that you have to talk to your customers, or not talk to, but talk with your customers. So right there on that note, do you think it's an issue to convince management, C-suite of these types of conversations? Because that could be a whole different mindset for them.
It is, but I've got an easy solution for you. And I talk about this a little bit in the book, but the first thing I would do if I were a brand who was trying to grasp all of this and trying to maybe prove to the C-suite that we should pay attention is I would go audit all of my social conversations. Every platform I'm using as a brand, go look at all of the conversations that are happening there, let's say within a month, and tag each one of those conversations that are coming through as acquisition or retention. Meaning, is somebody asking me a pre-purchase question, like they're interested perhaps in buying our products or services, or is this someone who's already purchased and is needing help with that product or service? Once you start to tag those conversations, you'll understand the volume of conversation that's happening for your brand around customer care. We did this little experiment with our clients, and we asked them, how much of the chatter do you think is acquisition? And across the board, they told us 0 to 5% of the social chatter would be acquisition. But what we found for every single one of our clients was about a group of 10 that participated in this experiment. Not one of them had less than 20% acquisition chatter happening on their social channels, which is these are people who want to buy from you. This is a big deal. And one of our clients had 4 product lines month over month, over a 6-month period, that had upwards of 60% acquisition chatter. So we now are working with their sales team to uncover these new frequently asked questions, build nurture content, build a social selling campaign. I mean, there's so much you can do that leads to revenue, but it starts with the conversation.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. Jennifer Witter agreed with Kirk Haslett. That's good. And Guy Skipworth, thank you. I paid Guy to say that. No, actually a friend of mine. Nice to see you here, Guy. When we're talking about tagging, comments with acquisition. Can you just explain that a little? Because I think maybe some of our viewers will think of it as, tagging, hashtag. It's not quite the same as that.
No, you could say tagging, you could also say labeling, but essentially you're auditing all of those conversations that you're having. And this is still reactive, right? I'm not even asking you to get proactive yet. This is all the incoming conversation, right? It's what's coming into you either through your social feed or perhaps through a direct message or a private message to your brand. And then I want you to label it or tag it. You can do this manually. If you use a social media tool for your dashboard, you could use labeling or tagging within that tool. Most of the platforms have a label or a tagging availability within the tool. You could just do it in a spreadsheet manually in Excel. But once you start to understand the volume of conversation, then again, you're going to look at the breakdown. Okay, I have this much conversation happening month over month, and this much of it is acquisition, and this much of it is retention. But even if you have 10% acquisition happening, that's money right there in front of you on the table. And even when we talk about retention, that's money right there on the table. Because if you can keep a customer, you don't have to spend so much time, energy, and money on attracting new customers, right?
Right. Brooke, before I'm going to ask a tools question because you did mention the tools or you could do it yourself. But I'm just curious. I feel like the whole customer care has changed. When we used to hear customer care back in the day, we automatically thought customer service or help desk, but it appears that it's expanded quite a bit. Can you just give your definition of customer care?
Yeah, customer care is taking care of the wants, needs, desires, questions, problems, pleasure points, pain points, all the things of your customer throughout the entire customer journey. So specifically, when we're talking about social media customer care, we're talking about that journey as it happens on social media. And that means I think it gets confusing because customer care is in the title, but like I'm telling you, a lot of that brand conversation is about acquisition. In fact, Twitter recently put out a report that said 76% of consumers are looking for brand conversation in the consideration phase. And so this is why they're coming out to social media channels and saying things like, "Hi, is your printer Alexa compatible?" And if you can answer that question quickly with valuable information, yes, and here's a video on how that works. And Martin, if you buy within the next 48 hours, here's a promo code for free shipping. Now we've helped that customer with their consideration, but we've also given them an urgency, a sense of urgency, right, when it comes to buying, because they now get free shipping. And on the back end, we're going to attribute that revenue to organic social media. So it's the whole life cycle for the client, but it's really the whole life cycle for the brand too.
Right. And you used my name in that, which is something which I noticed that's, again, one of the tips in your book. Brands don't do that enough. They respond to questions almost like a Q&A, as if they are a chatbot.
Yes.
Rather than making it human and sort of saying, "Hey, I'm talking to you directly." Why do you think that is?
I think honestly, a lot of it comes from copy and pasting or using chatbots. And I have nothing against chatbots. They're wonderful tools, but they do kind of miss the mark when it comes to things like personalization and empathy, right? Things that as consumers and humans, we're all looking for, especially right now. So instead of copying and pasting, come up with those answers and use the person's name in that first response. Because I forget who said it. I think it might have been Stephen Covey, right? But the most beautiful thing we can hear as a human being is the sound of our own name being said, right? Or in this case, written. But use their name, use your name. You know, a lot of brands have different guidelines, and some of them are like, "Oh, well, we don't like people to sign off with their names." Why? It's humanizing the brand.
Yeah.
And one of the elements of customer care that does really well is if somebody comes through to the B Squared channel and they see constantly that they're talking to Brooke, there's that built-in sense of trust that they're not talking to a different agent time and time again. If they see over and over that it's Brooke, Stacy, and Lauren, they feel more comfortable that they're in the hands of people who know them and understand them versus treating them like an avatar, not saying their name, and just, treating them like user 1234.
Right, really transactional. Kirk had a couple of comments. Dear customer does not work, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's not just sales, it is relationships. Makes you feel you really appreciate and value my business as a customer. So if anyone who is watching has questions, please post them in the comments and we'll get to them. I have a question now, and that is around the development of content and how it might change if a brand goes from, just straight content production to conversations.
Yeah. In the book, we talked about the onion theory, and I want you to think about having conversations like peeling an onion. I don't know how many of you have peeled an onion lately, but there are many, many layers, and sometimes you cry. You don't want to make people cry, at least happy tears maybe. But on the outside of the onion, right, the very round part, we haven't peeled any layers. That's the breadth of the onion. That's where the superficial should live. And you always want to have the superficial cliche and fact information because hopefully you're constantly gaining new followers on your social channels. So you're going to have kind of those easy layup type questions, right? Because you're still dating those people. You're not quite married yet. But as you peel the layers through, you want to get to opinions and feelings, which is the deepest part of the onion. Because for the audience members who've been with you for a long time, maybe they are customers, maybe they're loyal customers, maybe they're advocates, maybe they're part of your community. They expect you to go beyond breadth, right, around the onion into the depth of the onion. And they want those harder questions, opinions and feelings. So it's being able to have a mix of those types of questions that kind of fits your audience or your community and where it is, but always meets the breadth and the depth of the conversations that are needed.
Brooke, this is a lot of listening. And when we talk about listening on social media, the tools are really important. Now, you did mention that some brands, if you're low on the resources, you could accumulate some of the data yourself. But when it comes to the tools, what would you recommend?
I think social listening is the most missed, most undervalued tool out there right now because everything that we've talked about so far has been reactive, right? Everything that I've told you to do involves people coming to you, the brand, and asking these questions or making these comments. But think about it this way. A lot of conversations that are happening on social, don't tag the brand. Maybe they're talking about the product, right? And there's no product tag. So they are talking about your brand, but it's product specific. And therefore you're not getting that direct message or that mention. And then there's peer-to-peer conversation happening where they're talking about your products or your brand or your services or your stakeholders, but it's peer-to-peer. And again, you're not tagged or mentioned. You are missing most of these conversations if you're not using social listening. And by using social listening, you can go from reactive to proactive with your efforts. So for me, social listening is number one, uno. You got to get this tool. You got to use it.
Absolutely. Once you have your listening in place, how do you even know what to report on for management? How do you pull that together to make a meaningful report?
That's a great question. So you have to know what you're trying to achieve. This is like most marketing, right? The whole, I don't know what I want, but I'll know it when I see it will not work. You will be wasting time and money on your social listening tool if that's the approach you take. So understand what you want to achieve. And I have a really simple framework for people who are starting out called the BIC method, like the pin, BIC. And that is putting together keyword listeners around your brand, the B. So that could be like your brand name, B Squared Media, your stakeholder's name, Brooke Sellis, right? Then your industry. So looking at industry terms and conversations that are happening. So again, if we're going with the B Squared Media example, it would be social media marketing, social media customer care, social listening, right? Those would be industry terms that I would look at. And then for C, it would be my competitors. I can actually go out, listen in on what's happening on my competitors' conversations. And here's where that gets interesting. Imagine that my top competitor also provides social media customer care, but their response time, like the time in which they respond to your messages, is same day response time. That's not very good based on research. We know that the customer expects, probably about a 30 minutes response time. That's usually the window that you have based on a lot of research. So I could look at the negative conversation around that competitor and see that people are complaining that it's taking too long for their service to respond to these customer service requests. And then I could create a campaign. Here's where the campaigns come in after the conversation that has a little bit of tactical differentiation and says, we know you're sick of, having slow response times. We respond in 30 minutes or less at B Squared Media, right? So I'm using that data that I'm collecting through social listening about my competitor to differentiate my own messaging for my own brand.
Well, that's where data informs your communication moving forward. And I can't imagine a CEO or C-level who does not love that.
I love it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So if a brand comes to you and asks you for advice, what would the first two or three things, what would you tell them they need to do aside from hiring your firm? Although you don't say that, you kind of make the case through your, really through listening and through how you're presenting yourself.
Yeah. Top three things would be, well, I've said two of them, but I mean, they're worth repeating. Do a conversation audit. Go look at your social media conversations and apply those tags or labels, right? Acquisition, retention, because both of those are customer care. We're talking about early in the journey, late in the journey, right? After purchase. Second thing I would do is figure out how you can implement social listening. And I understand that some of the tools are very expensive. So mention.com, mention.com, actually has one free listener that they provide on their site. Just go set that up. Go set it up. Put your company name in. I would start with the B in the BIC method, brand, and see what kind of conversations are happening. See what the sentiment is, right? If you're seeing a lot of negative sentiment happen, that's a use case right there to go to the C-suite and say, we need to figure out what this negative chatter is all about and how to fix that, right? How to make it more positive. And the last thing I would say is, if you're already doing those things and you want to take it to the next level, really concentrate on those acquisition conversations. I cannot tell you how important it is to meet the customer where they are. So as I was explaining with the example earlier, and the brand that had over 60% acquisition, they had frequently asked questions coming that they had zero content to provide, right? Zero written out answers. And it could be something like a blog post. It could be something like a how-to or an instructional YouTube video, right? Showing versus telling is always really great. But these are things that will meet your customer where they are. But then once you can do that, use the second part of that answer that I gave Martin earlier, is how can I then come up with acquisition codes or links? So as I'm helping this person with that acquisition question, I can also then soft sell them on what they're looking at, because we know they're in the buying moment. They've already told you, I'm considering buying from your brand. Now help them make it your brand. Help them choose you by not only being helpful, but giving them some sort of like incentive to buy with urgency.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's really good. We have Evelina said you have to listen to your potential customers, not push your product services, but rather discuss how you can help. It's all about building relationships first and foremost. And then Shushan has a question. What tools, and you mentioned Mention, but what tools are you using or do you recommend for social listening?
Yeah, so we use at B Squared Media, we use and love Sprout Social. They have a pretty robust social listening platform that's for social media listening. Meltwater is another tool. I think it's a little more PR based, but still has some social components to it. Agorapulse has a social listening light program with their tool. So, I mean, there's lots of tools out there based on budget, right? There are lots of different costs. Sprinkler is another tool that's on like the higher end of listening. Again, what I would say to you is as you go demo those tools, know what your goals are. And then when you demo that tool with a company, tell them, I want you to show, here's my goal. And I want you to show me on this demo how your tool will achieve that goal for me. And if they can't show you on that demo how your goal would be completed with their tool, move to the next demo. So it's, again, like knowing what you want is going to get you so much further before saying, I'm not really sure what I want, but let me go demo these tools. Know what you want and then make the tools show you how they're going to get that done for you.
That's a great point. And also, when you select a tool, knowing that your team can manage it, because if you get a really strong platform and you have one person who isn't even dedicated to the social listening, you won't get as much out of it. And on that note, Brooke, does it take a team of people to do the social-led customer care? Is it one person? What do you think about that?
It's definitely a team of people. And I talk about this in the book. I kind of, set up the hierarchy of how your internal team should look. It definitely shouldn't be a siloed team. So it's not customer support. It's not marketing. It's not sales. It's all of those things together. And unfortunately, with social media, there's an inherent mismatch between the way organizations are traditionally structured and how social media works. Social's 24/7, and employees typically work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. So, there are ways you can make that work through chatbots and other things. But if you do decide to outsource, what will happen is you'll get that support 365 days a week, holidays, weekends, before hours, after hours. And unfortunately, that's when we see a lot of the uptick in those conversations. It's always on like Thanksgiving Day when something goes south and they're reaching out like, I need someone right now. And if you don't, have anybody within the company who can answer that question on Thanksgiving Day, it might turn into a little bit of a crisis.
Yeah, I think we have time for one more question. And really, do you have any final words of advice, Brooke, about, how you can encourage your company or your brand to embrace conversations and not just focus on campaigns?
I think, we're not starved for more content. If you think about content, you can go Google your subject matter, and there's probably at least 17 articles out there already on your piece of content, right? But for some reason, we just have this bug in us to create more of the same. So I want you to think, again, people aren't starved for content. They're starved for connection. So how, as a part of my content marketing and as a part of my social media marketing, can I make better connections? Community, if that's your North Star, if that's one of your goals, that doesn't happen on content. Community starts to happen and become recognized in the conversation. So how can my content spark more conversation? How can I ask more questions of my audiences that elicit opinions and feelings? And how can I, as a brand, share opinions and feelings? Because it's that reciprocity. It's a two-way street. If you want people to give you their opinions and feelings, you need to share your own opinions and feelings as the brand.
That's really great advice. We're going to have to get you back and delve deeper. Certainly, to talk more about this, and also to figure out, to get you to walk us through how to make brands less self-conscious, and individuals too, because it's all about people.
Sure.
It is. It's being vulnerable, which I understand is scary. But if you look at any of the relationships you have in your life right now, you had to be vulnerable to get there. So I'm asking brands to do the same thing. You've got to get vulnerable if you want to get to this kind of finish line, right? It's hard, but it's not impossible.
But that's how you get to a relationship, and well worth it, definitely. And there is a question about if this will be available. So this broadcast will be on Martin's LinkedIn feed.
Yeah, wherever you're watching it now, as soon as we stop, it's recorded so you can play it back. Evelina, I think that's who did this.
Excellent.
I'm trying to watch it on two screens. That's why I keep looking down. Anyway, it's about time for us to go. Brooke, thank you so much. Fantastic meeting you. And for anyone who's looking for a great book, Conversations That Connect, highly recommend it.
Yes, thank you, Brooke. It was great having you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, everyone. Appreciate it. And reach out. Bring those conversations right to me. I'm happy to continue them.
Terrific. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
See you next time.